Right, excellent. This is the 6th video in a series developed by GrayLine Partners to explain GrayLine's sales and trading model for pricing, analyzing, and presenting interest rate derivatives. Unlike the other videos in this series, the content of this video will be quite basic, actually, for people who deal with derivatives every day and really know the nuances of loans and swaps. The model's user interface may be perfectly intuitive, and that's the goal, really. But for anyone who does not have that kind of familiarity with OTC interest rate derivatives, this will certainly be a useful introduction. So we're going to look at each of the loan terms on the front end of the model, and we'll also see how to find answers to questions, in fact, if you have any of those, if the terms need clarification. So the first thing that we want to do is look at the input helps available to anyone who's using the model. Now, the model doesn't shove these down your throat. Be real here. It doesn't annoy you constantly with animated prompts. You pull them up when you want to, and to view these input helps, you simply right mouse click anywhere on the screen, and you see the little yellow light bulb here. Show the input help. So that will now show the input help for each of the input cells, you see, in blue that you select. From there you read what is expected as you enter values or text, or select components from a drop-down, what have you, and that is helpful insofar as you need that. Now I'm going to turn off these input help here, a red light bulb, and I'm going to walk through and describe each of these inputs. But you feel free to turn on the input helps on, off, anytime you like, whatever. Oh, and the input helps toggle on and off altogether. Now let's look at each of the loan terms in the upper left of the input screen. Before we do, notice that there are 3 main areas with information on this screen: the loan terms, obviously, the swap terms, and the solve for or outputs area. We'll look at it, the latter two in another video, and focus on the first column of inputs, the loan terms. We'll start with starting principal. How's that? You know, there may be amortization associated with this loan, but that's something we'll deal with later. For now, we want the principal that we're funding at the start of the loan. You see, the start date is simply the date that the loan starts. It may be today, it may be tomorrow, but whenever the loan starts. When you open the model, it will default to the as of date plus the number of look-back days. So here's the as of date, here's the number of look-back days. We'll talk about this in more detail, but hang on for just a bit more while we move on. If you want to start the loan in the future, let's say 6/1, you simply type in 6/1, and all of the other components will calculate automatically accordingly. Now, input the maturity or the term. You can do either. So as you see, if you input the term, let's say 5.5 years, it will automatically calculate the maturity date. And if you enter the maturity date, let's say we want to enter 3/15/2018, it will automatically, as you can see, calculate the term. So the frequency now is how often the rate on the floating loan will reset. And in the case of the model, it also means how often payments are made: monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, and annually. The second period starting date and the last period start date are calculated automatically, but they can be overridden, as with many of these. So the second period start date is the date on which the second period starts. Simple. Why is that important enough to get its own cell, you ask? A couple of reasons. It defines the reset day of the month for all the periods in between the first and the last, and it determines the length of the first period. Will it be a short stub or a long stub? or no stub period at all. The calculated date can also be overridden. So, for example, this indicates the first period goes from 6/1, that's the start, to 7/15 of the same year. That would be a longer period, 45 days, than the subsequent monthly periods, loan periods in the loan. If you say, well, I really want the first period to go from 6/1 to 7/1. So I'll type that in. And you see that everything gets recalculated accordingly, including the last period start date here. Now, the last period start date was February 15th, 2018, with a month to go to maturity, 3/15. And now we have a long stub in the last period of the loan, and that goes from, you can see, February 1 to March 15th, 2018. But not so fast. The maturity date can be changed as well. You might say, I really want this loan to mature in March, but on the 1st. So, 3/1/2018, boom. Everything is such that, in this case, we would go from the 1st of the month to the 1st of the month, every month, from the start of the loan to its maturity. Now, let's look at the loan day count convention here. I should say the roll date and the number of periods are calculated here. The loan day count convention gives several standard choices in the drop-down. These coincide with Excel's choices. The loan day count convention gets applied to the variable rate loan and indicates how interest will be calculated during each period. The amortization day count convention applies to the loan payment, but principal and interest, we'll get into that in just a bit. The loan credit spread is customer or facility specific, determined by the bank's credit department. If the credit officer gives you a rate of, let's say, 2% instead of 2.75, you put that in here, all part of the calculations. The floating rate index, you see, is calculated here, and it corresponds to the frequency. So, if this frequency were quarterly, then we would see this as 3-month LIBOR. So they're linked in this model. They don't have to be, but here they are. Monthly is far more common here for us. Look back days simply indicates for the beginning of each period how many days to look back to observe the index value on that day. So, for example, if the period begins on 7/1 and the loan look back is set to 1, and the value of 1 month LIBOR, the index, 1 business day prior to 7/1 will be observed, and that may in fact be June 30th. So the loan payment calculation gives several choices here in the drop down. I won't go into each one of these in detail. That will be for another video. But the amortization term indicates the number of periods over which the amortization is calculated. So if you've got, let's say, straight line payment calculation and amortization of 20 years, that means that the amount of principal amortization on this loan will be the same as the principal amortization, principal calculated in equal monthly installments for a 20-year loan. So that's truly. Here it gets a bit tricky. The start of amortization lists all the possible days on which to start amortization. These are all the reset dates. You'll notice it defaults to the immediate start of the amortization. If you don't do anything, it starts immediately. But you may say, well, I want to start amortization after 12 months. So in that case, you go down here, select 12 in the drop-down box. So in our example, then we would be structuring a $5 million loan that would have no amortization. It would be interest only for the first 12 months, and then it would pay down in equal monthly principal amounts until maturity. At which time there'll be a balloon payment, most certainly, of the principal remaining at that time. Well, listen, this has been fun. I've enjoyed talking about this. We'll continue our explanation of the GrayLine sales and trading interest rate derivatives model and its calculations in future videos. Please submit your comments and questions below. or to info@graylinepartners.com, and we'll do our best to respond. As always, you can learn more about us on our website. That's GrayLinePartners.com.